completely new on the Defiant Lawyers. What we're going to talk about today is not really related so much to legal matters, but economic and financial matters. And we got just the person who can help us do that. Yes, this is not Chloe. This is not attorney Chloe Corbett riding shotgun with me today. Or shall I say, I'll be riding shotgun with her, actually. No, today we got Sean DeRoe, a certified professional financial advisor, MBA. He is the man. I like to call him the Black Dave Ramsey. Or better yet, I like to say Dave Ramsey is the white Sean DeRoe. And you'll see what I mean in just a minute. Hang in here with us. We're going to bring some pain medicine to all the pain that you're feeling at the pump, in the grocery store, and so forth and so on. Hang in here. We're going to bring it just a second.
That Corbin and Corbett legal team fighting for the rights of the people. That father-daughter team investing in the youth when the system ain't treating them equal. Providing truth for our people, we able to reach them. So anytime you get accused for a crime and Lord knows you ain't do it, we here to get you through it. Exemplifying prudence and glorifying God, making sure you're compensated for other people's doings. Our vision is to be one of the best. We're small enough to focus on your matter throughout the neighborhoods of Dallas. Working constantly and making sure your rights are protected. A firm team of lawyers, aggressive, effective. A team that has your back in the courtroom. Two well-spoken black lawyers in the courtroom. Investing time and resources when it's evident that you were treated wrong. Now you walking out of Dallas courtroom with a settlement. Corbin and Corbett, the father-daughter legal tag team that has your back in the courtroom. Our purpose is simple. To obtain the favorable outcome for each client and glorify Christ in all we do. Our vision is to be one of the best and most...
All right. Thank you for staying with us and welcome back to the Defiant Lawyers. I am Augustus Corbett, a.k.a. the Minister of Justice, one half of the Defiant Lawyers. Chloe and I, we are a father-daughter legal team, and what we do is we provide critique and analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you, our listeners, with what you need to defy an unjust legal system. If you have not subscribed, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button, like, share, and comment. We want to hear from you. If you're not a subscriber yet, what in the world are you waiting on? We are bringing it every week. Every week we are empowering you with information. And this weekend, guess what? We've been on twice. Chloe and I were on yesterday, and here I am back again today because we know that you are experiencing some pain, economic, financial pain, and we wanted to bring you some pain medicine tonight. So again, we do have with us Sean DeRoe. First of all, Sean, thank you for finding some time to spend with us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on. And I know I'm holding a powerful seat. So, Chloe, thank you for allowing me to sit here and be the other half, at least for the next hour. I promise I'll give it back in good hands. But I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we're going to dive right in. There's a lot to talk about. Before we do, let me give you a proper introduction. Let me give you your flowers, okay? So hold on. Let's go to another screen here. And so Sean DeRoe has worked in the financial industry for over 26 years. He's passionate about helping people increase their financial knowledge so they can build wealth. We're going to spend some time talking about building wealth tonight. Sean has an undergraduate degree in finance, an MBA, a master's in business administration and strategic leadership, and he holds numerous financial certifications. Sean is also the author of 4 wealth building books and has contributed to Financial Juneteenth, the Huffington Post, and Lifeway Christian Publications. He lives in Dallas, Texas with his lovely wife, Pam, of 27 years, and their 2 beautiful daughters. So how did I do, Sean?
Man, you did better than best, brother. Can you go with me every time I'm somewhere so you can introduce me? I love it. I love it.
It would
That
be
was
an
great,
honor.
man. That was great.
Yeah, it would be an honor. And that's really a very short synopsis of all the accolades that we really could give you. We could be here actually for another 30 minutes just talking about all the things that you have done in this space, in this financial industry space. And I'm being serious. So that's why I'm excited to have you. I'm honored actually to have you because I mean, you could be doing so many things, Sister Pam, and the daughters and so forth. You could be doing all sorts of things. But again, I just appreciate you finding some time to provide some pain medicine in this space of finances.
Well, again, it's my honor, and you just mentioned it. I mean, obviously, just like what you do in your work, if we are a gift to the body and we hold the opportunity to ease people's pain, it's our duty, it's our responsibility, it's our role to do just that. So any little nugget, anything I can provide on this time that we're together, if it allows somebody to feel a little better, I'm certainly in my zone. I'm doing what I'm called to do. So you don't even have to, thank me, man. I'm supposed to be doing this. I just appreciate you giving me the venue and the medium to do it.
Okay. All right. So let's jump right into it.
Absolutely.
I actually went to your Facebook page, Sean. You had posted something recently, and I thought it was a good jumping off place. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen.
Yeah.
And if you will, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
hold on just a moment. I just got a message that it's your. I think it's your sound is just sounds like there's a slight echo. You all, we're going to keep going forward. If it's really bad, you all, please let me know. Because I want everyone to hear you very well and not be bothered with any kind of echo. Let me just make sure everything is good on this end. Okay, someone else said it sounds good to them. Chloe chimed in. So let's forge ahead. Ahead.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I stole this from your Facebook page. It's a good jumping off point. Okay. So $7.25 a gallon of gas.
Right.
I filled up the other day, Sean. It was almost $100.
My.
I can remember when gas was 59 cents, 69 cents. And here we're close to $5 a gallon. I suspect it'll be $5 the next time I get back to the pump.
Absolutely.
What's going on, man? Talk to me about this.
Well, I mean, obviously, you can see there's some parts of the country that have it a lot worse than we do. So for those who are living in Texas and more of the South that produces a lot of oil, certainly we still feel the pain, but not as painful as some other areas. Doesn't make our pain any better, but you can see places like California. I was there last week. They're experiencing $7 to, in some cases, $8 a gallon, and they're projected to go up to even $9. But we know what's causing this. Unfortunately, we are dealing with so many things right now, from what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. That's putting a course, somewhat of a lean on energy, and it's creating a supply demand. And obviously, oil is going off the roof, and we're back to pre-COVID numbers and even higher when you start talking about $120 to $125 a barrel. So gas prices are going up, but that's only a part of why we're seeing that. Again, we're just dealing with the overall inflation. We're going to get into that in depth, and more importantly, what you can do about it. But let's be honest, these gas prices, unfortunately, are not going away anytime soon. Between the geopolitical issue, with Russia and Ukraine, between all of the money that we're dealing with in terms of cheapening the dollar and creating more inflation, we're going to continue to see these gas prices. So now is, how do we handle them?
So,
Because
so you,
$7 hopefully is not coming to Texas anytime soon, but it's here to stay.
so are you literally telling us that we're not going back to $2 a gallon gas and $3 and $2? We're not going to see that ever again.
I wouldn't say ever. I would say not anytime soon. And obviously we don't know any type of black swan events. Look, when COVID came in, it pushed down oil down to negative because no one was out there utilizing the supply. So we could see some unfortunate events that drive oil down. We can see an oversupply. But what we're dealing with right now, and there's no
But hold
reserve,
on,
and there's
Sean. Hold on. You said
sure.
we're not going to see any unfortunate events. So are you saying it would take something bad to happen to bring prices down?
Well, that would bring it down immediately. Again, if
Okay.
you saw something like a black swan event, of course, we preferably are out of the COVID crisis, but you heard what was coming up behind it was monkeypox. God forbid we see anything like that, or we see another pandemic, but something like that will absolutely drive prices down, because again, no one now, it's a supply and demand issue. We have been cooped up in the house. We have been confined to our four walls for practically 2 years. So now you have all this supply out here. I mean, all this demand and very little supply. Like I stated, what's going on in Russia, unfortunately, has created somewhat of a lean on the energy, and that's what's creating the high prices. Now, there could be some price gouging going on as well,
I was
but
going
there's
to
no
ask
doubt
that.
about it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people out here ready to travel, ready to utilize their quote unquote freedom, and that's continuously pushing the prices up.
Wow, that is probably not something folks wanted to hear. That prices are going to stay, gas prices are going to stay in this area for some foreseeable future, and it would take something bad to happen to get the prices down immediately.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah, again, unfortunately, that tends to be the case. I could tell you another thing. We talked about a black swan event, but obviously another thing could be a recession. A recession typically tends to slow the economy down, and people are saving money. They're getting tight at the pockets. Some of them have lost their jobs. They're not going to and from work. A lot of reasons creates the lower demand, and therefore prices start going down. But that again is another unfortunate event that we have to somewhat lean on to hope that these prices go down. I won't get political. We saw what the Federal Reserve did last week when they increased the interest rates by 75 basis points. But Augustus, that's not going to do anything. The reserve banking system have no control over gas prices. President does, supply and demand does, but what they did last week in terms of trying to slow down inflation is not going to deal with the energy inflation. It may deal with our groceries. It may deal with things that other than the gas, but not the gas price. This is one thing that we're going to have to see other situations get happen before we see these prices go down.
so supply and demand.
Hmm.
Folks are getting out of the house and getting back on the road, traveling
Absolutely.
and so on. Right.
Hmm.
The war in Russia,
Yeah,
with Russia being a large supplier of petroleum,
absolutely.
some price gouging.
Hmm.
Okay. So those things are driving the market right now, the energy market, basically.
That's it. That's it. You are absolutely right. Those are the things that's continuously driving the energy market. And again, I don't care where you're listening from, those who are on right now, or even if you're watching the recording, just get outside and see. The streets are back to being packed. It's pre-COVID in terms of people are getting out here moving around. So right now we're complaining. We feel the pain, but it hasn't stopped us from the demand side. That's what's going to have to change. And they're trying to do that. They being the Federal Reserve as well as the government. They don't want to admit it, but they're trying to slow the economy. Anytime you slow the economy, everything slows down. Prices come down, even energy, because people stop moving around and traveling and spending money.
So which one then? So if the feds continue to keep trying to slow things down, then that's increasing the opportunity of the economy going into a recession. So
Right.
which one is worse, recession or inflation?
Hey, the Federal Reserve right now is almost in a no-win situation. They either have the responsibility of slowing the inflation down by raising rates and basically creating a recession and crashing the economy, or allowing inflation just to go rampant and people can't even afford the basic essentials. It's almost a no-win situation. So you ask a good question, which one's worse? I mean, they're both horrible because they're both going to create a lot of pain. They're both going to put a lot of pressure on people who or are on a, doesn't have that huge surplus, and no one wants to see their savings go down. There's an article that was out, I think, a couple of days ago that the average American savings has gone down $9,000 on average.
Wow.
Now, I can tell you that's a lot higher for some, a lot lower for others, but that's the medium average. $9,000 evaporated out of the average person's savings account. That's real money. So when you start looking at things like that, there's either hand. There's a no-win situation. Recession, high inflation, both of them creating problematic pain, and no one wants to deal with it.
All right. So what I'm going to ask you, and what I want to ask you now is, how do inflation versus recession, how do they affect the African American community? Or which one is worse? But before you answer that, Sean, let me acknowledge a couple of folks who have logged on YouTube and have made some comments. Let me do that quickly. We're going to have folks chiming in probably with comments and questions, and we like to acknowledge those people. So Addis Justice says, "Thank you for this show. I'm in California. In fact, let me just put this on the screen." He says, or she says, "Thank you for this show. I'm in California. I make about 50,000. I don't have a house. I don't have debt, but I don't have any savings. I won't say my age, 50s. Where do I start?" That's the kind of pain that we're talking about, Sean. That's why I wanted you up here to talk to folks just like Addis Justice.
Mm-hmm.
I read that fast. Let's just get it again, because this is why we're here this evening. "Thank you for this show. I'm in California. I make about 50 grand. I don't have a house. I don't have debt, but I don't have savings. I'm in my 50s. Where do I start?" What do you say to him, Sean?
Well, first of all, I would tell Miss Justice she's in a pretty good shape in terms of not having any debt. Obviously, houses create appreciation. That's the American dream, but in California, that could be the American nightmare because we know everything is overinflated, so expensive. So I don't know if she's in San Francisco, L.A., San Diego, or some little small area in California. But the bottom line is the price of living is so high in California that she just has to get started. The good thing is she can do it without somewhat of a nuisance around her neck because she doesn't have the arbitrage of debt on her. And that's the key. So I don't know her expenses, but I would encourage her, if she's able to do right now the ability to put 5%, 10% back of her savings, start building that cash flow, because that's key, especially what we see that's coming down the horizon with the dark clouds unfortunately looming in. The biggest thing you can do right now is start building your cash flow. Cash flow creates economic freedom. And if you don't have any savings, if you're in your 50s, good thing is it's not too late. But you have to now get disciplined, have to get urgent, and you have to start making some sacrifices. So again, don't know your financial situation, don't know if you have children, don't know where you are, but if you are making 50 and you're spending 40 for the year or whatever you're spending, take the surplus as much as you can and start putting that away hand that to your future self. You'll thank yourself later.
I would also say buy one of Sean's books. Okay. We're going to be talking about Sean's books throughout this evening. But Sean has written 4 great books. And I would recommend that you get one of them, if not all of them. The Money Monsters, The Wealth Shift, The Consumption Trap, and the 3-2-1 Formula. Which one, Sean, or which ones would best help Addis Justice?
Well, again, not knowing her full situation, I would say not knowing. I know the consumption trap is something she doesn't need because the consumption trap is something she's not under. She has no debt. So I would pull that one out and now start either looking at the wealth shift, and the wealth shift talks about how to build wealth in any situation, or even the 3-2-1 formula, which looks at a formula, how you can leverage three things so you can protect two things so you can go after the one thing. We can break all that down, but the bottom line is one of those two. Again, not knowing her full situation. The Money Monsters is just a book that talks about how 7 creepy eyes, because they all start with the letter I, how 7 eyes are basically stealing our wealth. And I did write that one specifically for African Americans because while it's across the board, these 7 eyes tend to hit us more than anybody else.
Okay, very good. All right. So Addis Justice, you can get Sean's books if you email him at seanderoe@yahoo.com. I have it on the screen. Let me put it on the big screen here. There you go, seanderoe@yahoo.com. And just email him, and he will work out with you how you can get one or more of these books. I would highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. All right, let's now, and thank you for the question and the participation. By the way, Addis Justice says gas in California where she lives is $6 per gallon. She filled up today.
Excellent, excellent.
All right, Sean, here's something else I stole from your Facebook page. But before we talk about it, let's go back to the question that I asked you earlier. And that is, what's the old saying? When America gets a cold, black folks get pneumonia.
Right.
How is inflation and or recession, how is it impacting Black America mostly?
Well, obviously, it impacts Black America or any Americans for that matter if they, based on their income situations. Anytime that you see the inflation rates rising at 8.6%, and it's eating into your fixed cost, that means that your dollar is going a lot less. So last year at this time, inflation was around 1.5%. Today, it jumps up to 8.6%. This is the reason why most of us, as we are going to the grocery store, buying that same thing of eggs, bacon, milk, butter, macaroni and cheese, whatever the 5 things that you bought last year is going to cost you a lot more this year. If you're not keeping up in terms of your wages and you're not seeing a wage increase, then unfortunately your dollars is going a lot shorter buying your necessities. And that's where we see most African Americans, not most, but a lot of African Americans based on their current, role in current jobs. So while it doesn't, I don't want to create that panacea and just do a broad brush and saying a lot of African Americans are being hit by this, because again, I think all Americans are, but those who were making likely $50,000 to $40,000 or less, they're seeing this more pain than anybody else, because again, that's basically eating into their reserves or even taking them underwater because they were just above water when there were no inflation. I mean, it's expensive to live. So when you throw 8% inflation on it, and these gas prices going crazy, that's gonna eat a lot of people's away from their savings, and we're seeing it. And unfortunately, we're seeing it hit even harder with Black Americans.
All right, so we have this graphic up that I stole from your Facebook page. It shows, I believe, stocks or invest. Yeah, it shows. Is that right? Am I interpreting this right? Are these the increase, the value of stock increasing from 2000 to 2020?
Yeah, so this chart basically states that if you look at the market over a long term, and you're right, this is the stock market, the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, a lot of people tend to look at it in a bubble. And I get it, because right now we're in 2022. We see that the market is in a bear market territory. If you have money in the market, you're likely down. But this chart tells you that if you step back and look at a more of a long-term view, it may not be time to panic sell, because as you can see, we've seen a few times, be it 2000, 2010, where we saw the financial crisis or the housing market. We saw the dot-com bubble burst. We've seen COVID crash just 2 years ago. Most of us don't even remember because it came up so quick. But just 2 years ago, the market went down over 30% in a matter of 2 months, 3 months. So we were in a strong bear market. And in fact, a lot of people would have sold. You can see what that arrow is where it says COVID crash. You would have saw all that substantial growth. Basically, you've been sitting on the sidelines. So it just says that if you have money put away for retirement or for some type of long-term approach, you want to look at that and step back and not get caught up in the panic. Because what happens is a lot of people panic sell. They get caught up in the distress. And that's where they get taken advantage of. Matter of fact, when the recession happens, I call them the dangerous D's, because when people have money, they come in and swoop up things that affect a lot of folks dealing with dangerous D's. The first D is that the debt that they're dealing with. A lot of people that when they are in a recession or when they're in a market crash, the more debt they have, the more that their arms are tied. They can't do much. And the debt leads to defaults. So when you start looking at debt and then you see defaults, people are starting to default. Unfortunately, we're starting to see bankruptcies already go up. And we've just come out of, again, as we mentioned, this COVID where people were getting cheap money, free money, had more money that they had for a long time. And yet now that we're slowly coming out of this, we're starting to see defaults increase. We also see, unfortunately, when the market starts to roll into a recession, and by the way, we're about a week away from knowing that if we're in a recession. I'll explain that here in a second. But when we see that the market and these CEOs are projecting a recession, then the next D happens, and unfortunately, that's downsizing. If you look at the news and start seeing how many companies are laying off, Tesla's already laid off 10% of their workforce, Coinbase, Peloton, a lot of the tech stock companies, a lot of organizations are getting prepared, they're getting in position, and people are getting affected by the downside. The fourth thing, unfortunately, when things start getting tight, people don't get along, and that leads to divorce. You recall, Augusta, I'm sure, because again, you work in the legal field. When COVID was happening, one of the biggest things that were going up, unfortunately, was domestic violence. Because people were dealing with each other, and this stress was, putting a lot of attention on folks. And I don't justify any of it, but the bottom line is it was happening. And that's what tends to happen in recession. So people go through divorce. And then the last thing is death. I mean, that's something no one can avoid. But when you don't have your proper moat set up around your financial fortress, that tends to allow people to start getting taken advantage of. So what I always tell people to step back, don't panic, position, pivot, but don't panic. And this is a good example of if you've panicked over the last 20 years, you see this as almost like a hockey stick. It's going almost straight up. And you would have panicked and missed out on a lot of opportunities. And we don't know what's going to happen here in the near future, but we can only look back and say, what's the market and what has history told us? And let's make some decisions based on those things.
So that was power packed. That was filled with all kinds of information. Okay. I mean, filled. And wow. So let's unpack it a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all, a very simple question. What is a bear market?
Yeah, that's a great question because that's exactly what we're standing in right now. And a lot of people don't even realize it. So a bear market is when the stock market goes down by 20%. So when the stock market goes down by 20%, they consider it officially a bear market. Now, when the stock market goes up, they consider that a bull market. I have no idea why they name them bulls and bears. Actually, I do. I used to always think that they were Chicago sports teams, the Bulls and the Bears. But that's not the case. When the stock market goes up, a bear, when a bull attacks, it attacks up. When a bear attacks, it attacks down. So that's why they call it the bull and bear market. Right now, we're in that market that's attacking down. So the bears are in control. So if you hear that terminology, that just means that unfortunately we're in a down market, and that's exactly what's going on right now. We're in a bear market.
All right. So here's a bit of a cynical question. Why does that matter to the average Joe Blow out here who probably has nothing invested in the stock market?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not cynical, I say, because everything matters. Everything is a domino. I'll give you an example. Unfortunately, when we start seeing bear markets, what typically happens is there's a lot of companies out here that's lost 20, 30, 40% of their value. So what was a $10 billion market share company may have been cut in half. Now they're 5 billion. Immediately, the CEOs and the CFOs now have to start realizing we have to cut costs because we're not as valuable as we used to be just a year ago. If that's the case, now they start saying, where can we cut costs? We start looking at head count. We look at inventory. We look at a lot of things that allow us to survive through this recession. And that's where a lot of people now get caught up in that downsizing. That's exactly what's happening as we speak. It's not because people just feel like, hey, it's time to start trimming fat for the sake of it. No, Tesla is a lot less valuable than it was a year ago. They've lost half of their market share in just a year. So therefore, you have to attest to that. You have to speak for that. How do we make up that difference? We have to start cutting an expensive part of our organization. So for the average Joe who doesn't even have money in the stock market, maybe they work at Walmart. I'll use that example. But if Walmart has gone down 15, 20, 30%, that's still affecting you because it's affecting you because now they either have to start, if not laying off, cutting costs, lowering wages, not giving raises. Their sales are slowing. So your hours may be affected. Prices go up. Obviously, so all these things have a domino effect. And when there's a bear market, that domino effect typically is not playing into the average Joe or Gio's favor because, again, it's a negative thing.
Okay. All right. I mean, I have so many questions based on things that you said. I'm looking at the graph again, and I'm looking at the COVID crash, and it's a pretty steep crash. Okay, mm-hmm. It's a huge drop, but the rebound is even greater.
Right.
So you're saying, or this graph is saying, and you're highlighting and pointing out that yes, there was a temporary drop, and folks who sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Panic.
Right.
And jump ship. You said that was a bad strategy because they were not able to benefit when the market turned back up, started going back up.
Yeah, and let me put a terminology on that strategy. I would say it's a bad strategy if you had a long-term time frame. It's not necessarily a bad strategy if either A, you need that money immediately and you can't afford to lose another dollar, or you, for whatever reason, are very risk averse and you can't sleep at night and it's creating issues, stress, ulcers, things like that. You have to then listen to yourself and say, you know what, I thought I was an aggressive investor. This market has proved to me I'm not. The average person, that's not the case. They're just looking at what's going on right now. Augustus, what's going on right now with our retirement accounts is not going to affect us when we need our retirement accounts, unless this market continues to stay like it is for the next 10, 15 years. But history said that the market doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. So what am I doing making any changes on my investments if that's long-term opportunity? So that's why I would say, again, I don't knock anybody for aligning with their truth and being comfortable with where they are. This is just a graphic to say, think it through. Could you be panic selling, or indeed, is this something that you need to do? So while I never would give advice and tell people they should or should not, this is just a graphic that says, look at the last 20 plus years. This is not new. What we're seeing, we've seen it before. If you're old enough, you lived through Y2K, you lived through the .com bubble, you lived through the housing bubble. Those housing bubbles, it's almost not even on the map. That's the financial crisis. That you can see how small that was, but you and I remember that like it was yesterday because it hit us. They called that the Great Recession. But look where the market has gone since then. So if you and I would have reacted in 2008 based on something that I didn't need 10, 15 years from now, look where you would have basically left on the bad strategy or right or wrong. It's just that you always want to know where you are so you make sure that you are pivoting and not panicking and positioning yourself well.
Well, doesn't that also assume that you are a smart investor, that you are a sophisticated investor, and that you have put your money in the right place? And so, it's probably going to turn back up for you. But if you don't know what you're doing, right? Um, you know, things could go bad and stay bad.
Well, it could, but I would tell you probably 80% of the people that are in the market don't, they're not an expert. And that's no different than me. If I go outside right now and I see oil coming from under my car, I can get under there and mess with it, but more than likely, I'm going to need to take it to an expert. So if you have some type of money in some type of investment, you should be connected to that organization, that financial team, and be able to bend there. So if you have company, or you have, if you don't feel like if you have a financial advisor, you have somebody that you can pick up the phone. If you have a retirement account, if you have money at some place, there's somebody you can pick up the phone and say, look, I have money with you guys. I need to make sure I'm understanding and doing this correctly. That's the first crazy I in my Money Monsters book. Most of us get in trouble because we try to operate in isolation, Augustus. We don't lean on the experts. That's like me going into a courtroom and trying to be my own defendant. And you're sitting there right next to me saying, Sean, I can help you, brother. I can help you. I said, look, I got this. And I had no experience, no expertise, no backing, no support, no schooling, no understanding of what it takes to be an attorney, but I'm defending myself. That's operating in isolation. That's the second I. That's also operating in ignorance. So I always tell people, stop doing that. It's a great question. Most people say, I don't know what I'm doing. Great. Then connect with somebody who does know what they're doing. You're an expert at what you do, regardless of what it is. I guarantee you, everybody here is listening can do something somebody else can't do. That's your expertise. Everything else, you let somebody who knows what they're doing take care of it and go from there.
Yeah, we have an old saying in the law: the person who represents himself has a fool for a client.
Exactly.
And
Amen.
that brings me up to this question, Sean. What is your position on cryptocurrency?
Well, I mean, it's just another form of currency. I'm not going to say it's good, bad, indifferent. It's probably here to stay. But my position is that just like anything, get educated, get with somebody that you feel like can teach you and tell you about it. And then I would always tell people, this is your hard-earned money. Could it be speculative? Sure. But, again, somebody who's been in Bitcoin for the last 7 years and been consistent has probably made a lot of money. That doesn't mean that you should jump in it. Doesn't mean that you should be invested in it. Somebody else could say, I've lost a lot of money because I got in and out. I day traded it. It was speculative. So my position is this. Just like any particular stock, any particular real estate, any particular business, do your research first. Stop listening to all the naysayers and YouTubers and everybody else who's telling you this is going to be the next big thing, because it may be, but you're going in blind. You're not doing your own particular research. You're not doing your own education, your own updating. You're taking someone else's word. And you may say, well, Sean, didn't you just tell me that? You just said get with a financial expert to help you. And I agree, you should. But you should also try to understand and learn about this, because ultimately this is your hard-earned money. And all they can do is tell you, I think this is going to be a good opportunity. But you know all the information. You understand that this is a particular currency that could possibly replace the dollar or fiat currency in the future. Some countries have already adopted it. Some countries are thinking about adopting it. You can right now go to places and buy, everything in Bitcoin. There's some places in the United States that, they're Bitcoin communities. There's homes that have been bought using Bitcoin. There's cars that have been bought using Bitcoin. There's some now retail shops that you can go in and buy a cup of coffee using Bitcoin. So there's no doubt about it. That is here to stay. Cryptocurrency is possibly an opportunity to here to stay. But again, I'm not here to say you should or shouldn't. You just need to look at and do your own research. And I would never recommend something that people, based on what people said, hey, I heard this is a good opportunity. Should I get into it? So I know I didn't really answer the question, but it's like anything, Augustus. You have to just do your research on it. But it's no doubt about it. Bitcoin is probably here to stay. but
Yeah.
time will tell.
So let me say that Sean is a licensed, professional, certified financial advisor, and he cannot give advice in terms specific advice in terms of this stock or that stock, and I've known that about him for many years. And so we're not going to get into that. So that's why I asked this general question.
Yeah,
Just what is
absolutely.
your position on cryptocurrency? So thank you for answering that. Um,
Absolutely.
just a follow up question there. Is cryptocurrency especially risky during this inflationary period or during a recession?
Well, if you just look at it, look, most people thought in Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies was a hedge protector. And if you look at what
Mm,
cryptocurrencies have done in the last 6 months, it's gone down more than 50%. So that kind of answers the question. Is not a protection against a hedge against inflation like a lot of people thought. It's gone down like every other stock. It's gone down like most sectors outside of energy, which has gone sky high. So that's myth has kind of been broken. I mean, it's kind of been blown up in most people face because here's the thing: we've been hearing that Bitcoin is a great hedge protector against inflation, but that was all being said when there was no inflation. Now that we see inflation, now that we see unfortunate bear markets in that's going on out here, Bitcoin is doing what everything else is doing. So again, that's where I would say time is a proven proves this point to everybody, and right now it's proven itself that Bitcoin is not exactly what a lot of people thought it was, at least not in this type of environment.
okay. We're going to make the turn in a moment and start talking about how to go to the next level despite all the bad news. But a few more questions on the bad news here, Sean, and then we'll make that turn. Um, so I put up a graph here that shows how inflation, in fact, has risen over the
Mm-hmm.
past 3 years, and it's pretty steep. I mean, you're talking about a hockey stick. Here it is. Now we kind of talked about it a little bit already, quite a bit actually, but I wanted people to see that this is real. I mean, this really
Right.
is real. And when I think of inflation, to simplify it for lay people like myself who are not professionals like you, I see it when I go to the grocery store, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I spend $250 2 years ago, that would hold me and my wife, we're empty nesters, that would hold us for a month.
Mm-hmm.
Now that same $250 may hold us a week.
Right.
So I'm spending the same money and getting less value for it.
Right.
So that's kind of the way I sort of process this whole inflationary thing. And as you said, if you're not, increasing your income and revenue in some way, it's really, really, really going to hurt.
Absolutely.
So that's,
That. Mhm.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say 100%. I mean, what you just described is what people are feeling right now. They're stagnated wages, but inflated prices. And as you can see on this chart, and it's really been for the last 4 or 5 months that we've seen inflation just take off. And we know the culprit. The culprit was, they say the culprit is three things: Putin's war, the pandemic, which created supply chain and all this stimulus money, and then price gouging. I mean, they are, suppliers are no doubt about it. They are taking full advantage of this, and they're increasing prices as well. So with those three things, now you have inflated prices. I was blown away a couple of months ago when I went and saw what it cost for a package of bacon. I was like, that's double what I used to pay last year. And that's when it hit me that these prices are here to stay, at least for the short term, because that's what I mean in terms of what the Federal Reserve is basically. They're in a no-win situation. Now they've increased the rates. So you're going to start seeing somewhat of a slow economy. Slow economy means that we will start seeing some prices go down. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to probably be the next 6 months to a year that we really see things get back down to where it was. But At the same time, I will tell you this: we've been in a very low inflation environment for the last probably 10 years. If you go back, you can look at that number. Typically, inflation on average, up and through the 2000s, on average was about 3%. But if you go back the last 10 years, it was on average about 1.5 to 2%. So we were getting a lot of cheap money, free access, and now that's stopped. Two things happen. And the Federal Reserve has two mandates. They can either continue to have the economy humming along by pumping out a lot of stimulus or buying a lot of corporate debt. They've been doing that for years. Quantitative easing, you probably have heard that terminology over the last couple of years. That means that our Federal Reserve was spending billions of dollars on government debt and continuously keeping prices down, keeping inflation down. And then on top of that, they were also keeping interest rates down. As mentioned, we were almost in a 1 to 3% interest rate environment for the last 10 plus years. And then when COVID happened, they put it all the way down to zero. And he made a statement, I'll never forget, on June 10th, 2020, that really told people this is the time, if you're going to do it, but you have a short time, to build wealth. And he told us this. He said, I'm not even thinking about raising rates. When he said that, Augusta, I told my wife, this is the time to start building wealth because there's so much cheap money. On top of that, there was $5 trillion of stimulus that they had thrown out and told the society, we're not going to let anybody fail. For the most part, every company out here, we're going to allow you to continue to continue to put a bridge under you so you won't fall off a cliff. So you can't fail. You're going to succeed. And for the consumer, we're going to lower your interest rates basically down to zero. Now, we wasn't spending money in the first place and nothing was being produced, but that was the time to go get rich. Now everything has changed. Now, immediately where you could have got a mortgage rate last year about 2.25, 2.75. Today, that same mortgage is at 6%. Things have changed. They pull the ranks in, no more quantitative easing, no more buying bad debt. That money is dried up and it's stopped. So we're in a situation right now where the clouds are here. And I'm not creating or trying to produce fear because we know we serve a God that doesn't produce fear. But he does expect us to be prepared. And he does expects us to be positioned. It's kind of like the ant in Proverbs 6:6-8. He tells us that we should be like that ant. It has no commander, no overseer, but it collects its food in the summer, so it'll be provisions at harvest or in the winter. Our job is to make sure that we're collecting the food right now because tough times are coming, cold times are coming, winter is coming, and we want to make sure that we're prepared for it.
Well, it reminds me of how God gave Joseph in the Bible a dream where he saw fatted cows for 7 years, and then he saw very thin cows for 7 years, and God gave him the interpretation, you need to build wealth now during these good 7 years because the bad 7 years are coming. So that's what I heard you say. Now, also the Bible tells us that Isaac, the son of Abraham, was able to prosper even during a famine time. So let's make that transition, okay? Let's talk about how people can yet increase their revenue. Before we get into that, Addis Justice made another excellent point, and it kind of goes back to the stock market stuff that we were talking about. I want you to just commented on it very quickly, and then we're going to make that turn. She says right-wing conspiracy says the market will crash, and we should invest in gold and silver. What do you think about that, and how do you start investing in those things if you want it to? Well, first of all, again, let me say that Mr. Duro cannot give specific investment advice. But to the degree that we're able to generalize her question, I think it's a great question because you put that graph up that showed the last 10 or so years of the stock market, despite momentary, temporary drops, it still continued to increase. And I
Right.
believe we can go all the way back to like 1920 or so and show how the market has increased over those 100 or so years, despite all
Right.
that the economy has seen. But
Absolutely.
Sean, she's asking, and it's a great question. Um, and you just said how the feds are just spending money they don't have. They're putting all this cheap money out there, just printing money. There's nothing to back it up. At what point is all this going to just crash?
It's a good question. And that's a thing that we're all waiting to see. Because who knows at what point, but at some point, this cannot continue. And oh, by the way, they have officially at least stopped it or slowed it down. So now the question is, how will it affect what has been going on for the last 15 to 20 years? Because they have basically created somewhat of a monster with pumping up the economy, holding it up, keeping it stable, and making the economy very artificial. Now, for good reasons, in COVID, they had to do that. We basically shut down as the economy. No money was flowing. Keep people sustained. I get it. They had to do it. But we've seen that happening since the housing bubble burst. And I won't get into the political bailouts, but all that has created that long run over the last few years. And now it's stopped. The question now is, where do I go? Now, as you mentioned, I'm not going to tell people where to invest in, but, going back to her question about, first of all, anytime anybody pushes you in one direction, be it conservative Republicans or liberal Democrats or independents, then they have an agenda. There's a reason why they're doing that. So I don't know if she's read that or whatever, but I would never go off of what one party or one person or one group or whatever is doing just because they're saying it. That probably is an agenda for them to go in that particular direction. Gold, look, I hear all the time. That's another thing. Gold is a hedge against inflation. Well, gold, look, you can't do anything with gold right now. A lot of people say, I'm going to get all this gold and put it in my garage. And for the most part, you can have a gold watch, gold necklace, gold teeth. But for the most part, gold is as valuable as what people make it. And I think right now we're looking at about 1,800 per ounce for gold. But if you look at the last 15 to 20 years, gold hasn't really done much. I'm not suggesting that it's not a good investment, but it's not, at least historically, it has proven in the last 20, 25 years, if you add $1,000 in gold, you're not going to, you probably wouldn't even double your money. So again, I always tell people, it's not that it's a bad thing, but what's the premise behind what she just said? Someone's pushing that, and it's probably an agenda and the reason why they're pushing it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering that. Let's make the switch. I'm quoting directly from your book, The Money Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
You said that folks can make money, maintain money, multiply money, and manage money. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, you're talking about the 4 pillars of wealth. I believe the 4 pillars of wealth to build any wealth is that you have to learn how to do all 4 of these things. Most people only think about making money. Hey, I'm all about making the money. And I agree, you have to make the money because that's what starts you or puts you in the game. But I believe that's the only start. That's not where you should put all your focus and then just stop. Because once you make it, now your job is to multiply it. Again, I believe that everything God gives us, he expects an increase on. He wants us to multiply anything that he provides to us. And if he's not multiplying, then as Jesus did in the Bible, he cursed the fig tree because it was not producing anything. So our job is to make more of whatever he gives us. So we have to learn how to multiply. But then a lot of people, they don't keep what they make. They don't keep it for the next generation, or in a lot of cases, they don't even keep it for this generation. This is the reason why a lot of people are making it to the age of 65, 66 with $5,000 to $10,000 saved for retirement. Or let me be fair. The average retirement for a retiree currently is about $50,000. Now, to play that all the way out, in their lifetime, they likely made over $2 million. I don't care if you only made $40,000, $50,000 on average. If you do the math, if you work 40 years, that's about $1.5 million. But why didn't they maintain it? I get it. You have to live. You have to make sure that you're eating in the current day. but you also have to be like that ant. You have to save some for winter. So our job is to learn how to maintain it. And then you can't do any of those things if you don't know how to manage it. A lot of people don't realize there's only 5 things that you can do with money. You can give it, you can save it, you can spend it, you can protect it, or you can invest it. So these 5 things will determine how you manage your money and if you will create wealth, or bottom line, if you're living hand to mouth. So that's what I mean by these 4 things. So absolutely, we can get into all 4 of them, but that's, to me, is the 4 pillars to building wealth. And if you only have 1 or 2 of these, then likely your pillar is falling in, it's imploding, because it doesn't have the strong stance. It doesn't have the strong foundation, and the pillars holding it up to protect your overall assets.
Is one of these 4 things more important during an inflationary time or recessionary time?
Yeah, I would say of the 4, absolutely the maintaining. See, right now, in my opinion, and when you start looking into any type of recession or any type of contraction, you have to now start protecting your assets more than anything. You have to build that moat around what you currently have. So you have to learn how to maintain it, meaning that you may have to go in and start cutting some things. You may have to go in and start eliminating some stuff. I'm not talking about scrimping or budgeting or contracting. I'm not talking about having a scarcity mindset.
Hold on. So are you disavowing budgeting?
Well, when I say budgeting, I'm talking about, because most people, when they hear budgeting, what they first think about restrictions. So yeah, budgeting, no doubt about it. If we want to put a name on it, that's practically what it is. I guess what I mean about saying is, all of a sudden now you absolutely can't go and get that cup of coffee because you can't even enjoy life. I'm talking about being a good steward, meaning that if you're giving, if $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 is coming into your household on a monthly basis, you should be maintaining a portion of that. I say minimum 10%. So wherever you are, if you make $5,000 for the month, you should be maintaining $500. If you make $1,000, you should be maintaining $100. You make $10,000, you get the math. Bottom line is you should be maintaining it. The question is, well, Sean, what if you can't maintain it because all the money that you have is going out to spend on lifestyle? That tells me that you are living right above the water. And a lot of people are doing that. The water is right up here at the nose. And if they sneeze, they'll start drowning. So you have to now go in and do better management. That means that you're not managing the assets. You should not be living from hand to mouth, hand to mouth, hand to mouth. And again, I know everybody's situation is different.
What do you mean manage the assets? You shouldn't be managing the assets. What are you saying?
No, I say if you are living hand to mouth, then you should be a better manager. I say you can't live hand to mouth, so you have to now start managing it accordingly. You have to go in and basically put an X-ray on your finances.
Okay.
See, a lot of people say, "Man, I can't afford to do that." What it is really saying, "I don't want to sacrifice. I don't want to do the discipline to take. I don't want to go without for a season, so I can now start building this nest egg up, so I can get through this rough patch called the recession or a market crash or whatever." I guarantee you, if you put an X-ray on most people's finances that said, "Look, I don't have any type of room," they do. Likely they have some room. They just don't want to. They don't want to give up Netflix, or they don't want to give up, particular things that they feel like they can't live without, or that gym membership or whatever. And I'm not suggesting that you give it up forever. I'm just saying for a season. And that's only if you are not in a position to save 10% of what you're bringing in. So if you're saving 10% of what you're bringing in and you want to still keep whatever it is you want to keep it. I still say a lot of us, we still can cut the fat. That goes into my book, The Consumption Trap. I think a lot of people can cut a lot of fat. But if you want to enjoy life, if you're saving 10, 15% of your salary on a monthly basis, then you're at least maintaining a portion of it. And that, going back to your question, in my opinion, is probably one of the most important things that you can do inside of a recession. But all of them are equally important. I would just say I would focus on that one in a recession more than anything.
Well, I would have said, this is my ignorance. I'm a lay person in this area. I would have said multiply. It seems to me during the recession, or especially during inflation, where your money is not worth as much, you need to be trying to multiply it in some way.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that, but what I'm saying is, if again, we can come from different angles. So if I'm talking to different type of people on a different type of economic streams, absolutely. But on in general, because I'm talking average American route. So average American needs to concentrate on maintaining, because what that does, Augustus, it's allowing them to create a cash flow and build up a nest egg. So now, in the midst of a recession, when everything is dirt cheap, you can start buying up bargains and then allow that to multiply over time. But most people can't throw a dart at opportunities because they don't have any type of bullets in their gun. They're saying, "Look, I'm basically just really going hand to mouth, where I'm doing just enough to get through." And yet there's so many opportunities all around them, because, as mentioned, we see when the economies contract, that's when opportunities happen. And let me tell you something: opportunities don't go away; they just go to others. And if you're not in a position to take advantage of multiplying money, then it does. You've missed golden opportunities to increase. So yeah, multiplying is definitely important, but if you're in that position, if you have right now some cash reserves and built up, this is the time over the next couple of months, if it gets as bad as they're projecting, that you want to start rubbing your hands together saying, what can I get on sale? But you have to be in that position.
And maintaining is what enables you to be in that position.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
That's what's building your core competence. Yep. So here's what I would tell people: the average person, again, this is not me talking. This is not, and I'm not talking just African Americans. I'm talking about Americans. The average is over 48% of Americans cannot come up with $1,000 of cash if they had $1,000 emergency. That means that they're not maintaining the money. Now, that other 52%, if they have more than $1,000 or whatever, then they could say, let me take this money and apply it to opportunities that now were not as cheap as they were a year ago, 2-3 years ago. But half of the country, based on that statistic, says they don't have anything to apply towards the multiplication of their wealth.
Now, Sean, we know that African Americans face a lot of systemic racism. Okay. How does that bear on Black folks' ability to do these four things: make money, maintain money, multiply money, manage money?
Well, I mean, look, I'm sure we can give an anecdotal response to and give you examples of every situation of how, this brother or that sister came out of a racist situation and came up, and they're very wealthy because they utilized their gifts and they went forward and they didn't take no, and they dropped the excuses. But there's no doubt about it. Look, when you see situations where average African American makes 15% less than the average white person or the average Asian or whatever, that means that we're coming into the ball game with a lot less to play with. We don't have as a loaded gun like other races. We know that, and that's the reality of it. But I don't think that should prevent us, and it should not, and it cannot prevent us from building wealth unless we allow it to. Some of the things that I mentioned, and again, I say all the time, and especially I put that in my book, there's no doubt about it, man. We have experienced some incredible injustices over the years. But injustice is not one of my crazy eyes. I don't use that as one of the things that's keeping us from being wealthy. I do use irresponsibility. I do use ignorance. I do use isolation. I do use insurance or the lack thereof. I use things like illness. People are too sick to better themselves, or this what we're in right now, inflation. Things like that. So these are the things that's really destroying average African Americans' wealth. And racism does play a role of putting us behind the game and giving us a late start, if you will. But it doesn't stop us, because everybody has access to, as an example, Apple computer. Everybody has access to Walmart. I'm talking about in terms of investing. Everybody has access to a computer that can get online and do exactly what you're doing right now and can monetize it. Everybody has access to a lot of things. Your job is you have to go out And first of all, utilize your core competencies. This goes back to the make. You have to become more valuable in this day. That's the bottom line. You have to become more valuable. Augustus, look, as we know, COVID was horrible. It did some horrible things. I lost 2 family members, I almost lost my mother. So we know COVID and the danger it possessed. But really, outside of, I would say, the essential workers, for most of us, COVID made us lazy. COVID really created comfort. You know, Augusta, you and I was talking before we went live how you hadn't been in a courtroom for what, 2 years? That allowed you to, I know you were still working hard, but that basically shifted your world and put you back in the house. You wasn't outside. You wasn't doing a lot of things. You likely, again, you were saving money. You wasn't spending money. You know, a lot of us that didn't need it got these stimulus checks. It made us lazy. But here's what's about to happen. That's about to be stripped away. Because what is now happening is the power has been put back into and will be put back into the corporate hands. See, that's why we saw the great resignation the last couple of years, because people had, you know, fat pockets. They said, look, I don't think I'm going back to work. They're making me come in. I'm not comfortable. It was really a little bit of not being comfortable. Some of it was probably just, you know, laziness. And I'm not, again, not painting that broad brush, but it did put the power in the employees' hands. That will change if we see a recession. You already see and hear these CEOs saying, time to come back. If you heard what, you know, Elon Musk said a couple of weeks ago, he told his entire workforce, get back in this office. And if you don't want to come back, you don't have a job. And he then ceased to cut 10% because 10%, I guess, said, I'm not coming back. He said, okay. Now, he couldn't do that 2 years ago. He couldn't do that. He wouldn't do that 2 years ago. But everybody now is starting to look at the bottom line. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, he basically said, get ready for a tsunami. There's a big hurricane coming. And if you don't think they're preparing for that, and they're starting to look at the bottom line and say, who can we cut? So in this day and age, everybody must make themselves more valuable. You have to now start increasing your skills. You have to, as mentioned, start pivoting. I don't care if you feel like all I do is work at Walmart. Still, a Walmart manager will still come down to seeing who is a good employee, on time, does their job, great attitude, versus who's just here. Because we got to start trimming fat. You got to become more valuable. If you have a business, you're going to see less and less competition, but here's what's happening. Now people will start sparsing and saying, where do I spend my dollars? I had 7 attorneys to choose from a year or two ago. And it didn't matter if they were half good because everybody was okay. Now my money's getting tighter. I'm starting to look at things through magnifying glasses. So entrepreneurs is going to start getting a little bit looked at a little bit more serious than they were a couple of years ago. You have to now start becoming more valuable. Get good at whatever you do. Get better at whatever you do. If you're learning to do something new, then do it. But the bottom line is that's how you start making more money. You become more valuable to the marketplace. A lot of people say that it takes money to make money. It doesn't take money to make money. It takes value. It takes creation. It takes service. And it takes the right mentality and the right attitude. So I'm just rambling, but I'm telling you, that's what's going to win if we go through a severe recession. It's the value that people put on you.
All right. So, but let's go back. I want to push back a little bit. All right. So I have something on the screen here. It says in 2019, the median wealth without defined benefit pensions of Black households in the United States was $24,000 compared with $189,100 for white households, which means the average white family has at least 8 times more wealth than the average Black family. So, okay. I mean, this just points to systemic racism and how it impacts Black wealth. I mean, this is real money here. I mean, $24,000 of wealth versus $190,000, almost 240,000, almost 10 times the wealth. So Here's a real life example. So you scratch, you scrape, you made money, you multiplied money, you maintained money, you did everything, bought yourself a really nice home, but because you black, your home is the appraiser says your home is worth 20% less than the same home in another zip code. And that's just one example of how black wealth is sort of eaten up. So you know, systemic racism, it seems to me plays a much bigger role with depreciating black wealth than we like to admit.
Yeah, well, look, first of all, I appreciate the pushback because it's a great dialogue, and I'm not disagreeing with you on systemic racism. I will say that example that you just gave will not give that type of disparity, though. If somebody, that's what's creating the disparity, is that white America, Asian America, matter of fact, that number has gone down, Brother Augusta. I can tell you about 5 years ago, it was 10 times, they had 10 times our wealth. Now it's 8 times our wealth. I don't know when you took this study, but I could also tell you this. You make a good point. But I want you to go and look at it a little further. We know systemic racism exists. We know that a lot of wealth has been handed down to generations upon generations. But there's a group in the United States that, if you looked at them about 20 years ago, they had on average about $50,000, $60,000 of net worth. Today, they're right on the heels of Caucasians, of white America, and they're projected to pass them in the next 5 to 7 years. Who is that group?
Asians?
Asians. So how can they come over and build wealth so quick and create all these opportunities, and yet our wealth is not bridging the gap? Some of it is systematic racism, but also some of it is culture, habits, money monsters. Because in your example that you just gave, yes, even in black communities, our houses probably would be, unfortunately, valued 20% lower. But that disparity will not be 10 times higher. That's one of the keys, is getting in there and having home ownership. Then also saving. A lot of this is also retirement savings or investment savings. And again, it goes back to just making it a discipline. And this beautiful family, this African-American family that you're showing me, if I was talking to that brother and sister, I would tell them, to create wealth and pass it on to your children, you're going to have to more than likely get into the homeowner's game. Don't rent. Start saving for yourself, for your future, so you're not handing them bills, but you're providing generational wealth. If you can, put something behind, invest in something in a 529 plan for the college savings, so they don't get they're not starting 5 miles back because they have to take out these enormous student loans. I mean, there's so many things that we could do. And yes, we have to overcome the systematic racism. We know that's part of it. But those numbers, those disparities, I would say, Augustus, it's not all racism. Some of it is just habits and culture that's creating those numbers as well.
I'm quoting something from your book, The Money Monsters, that you actually quoted from Claude Anderson.
Yeah.
That says, during slavery, blacks owned 1.5% of America's wealth. Today, 150 years later, and I think this was about 2018. I think you published the book in 2018.
Yeah, you're right.
Today, 150 years later, blacks still own only 1.5% of America's wealth. So do you attribute all of that to culture?
I attribute
or that less of that, virtually zero progress over 150 years.
Well, think about it though. But look at that all the way through. In that, we've seen more black billionaires than in history. We see certainly a lot of black millionaires, mega millionaires. So it's not like we have not progressed. If you go back 150 years, our ancestors would say, "Oh my God, the wealth is incredible." So that means that the opportunities are there. For anybody that's listening, I'm not trying to tell our business. You're talking to two brothers that are, economically in good positions. We're no better or different than anybody else. We just have applied principles, responsibilities, education to get us to another level. So if systematic racism was part of that, why did we come up out of that, those averages? But so all I'm saying is there's a bigger pot to it. I'm certainly not trying to point fingers at Black America. I'm saying it's not let's just not create that panacea and say, hey man, this is all racism. That's the reason why there's such a gap. Because I do believe that some of it, anybody that's listening, if I had, I've proven it. As you know, brother, I call it now a $1 million mastermind group that I help with millennials. And I'm telling you, these young men some of them have already surpassed me. And if you hear their story, what they started from and where they're going, and they just apply just principles, man, things that if you do what the word of God says, if you do what the practical financial advice tells you, you will be in good shape. So some people are just starting behind. So even that sister that's right now in California making $50,000, I guarantee you, if somebody was to sit down with her and show her strategies on how she can build wealth, even with 50 grand, I'm not saying she'll get there tomorrow, but she will get there if she puts the right plan in place. And no racism can overcome strategy and God. And I believe that we can do that. It's just that that's the biggest issue, though. I believe that that's not being told enough to our people. And therefore, we stay in what we feel like we can't do.
Yeah, we've had these discussions and conversations many times over the years, and we actually agree on this. I completely agree with everything that you said. We need to make the conversation interesting, though, so that's part of what my job here today is to make it interesting.
Right.
And
they got some, I will tell you this, man, they got some good young brothers out here doing just that, man. They're bringing it down to the everyday lingo. They're simplifying the complicated. I'm thinking about a brother named Wall Street Trapper. Somebody may have heard of him. Another brother named Him 500. These guys, they speak the lingo. They're young. They're hip. They have swag. They have the juice. And they're getting the message out to a community that I couldn't probably talk to, and certainly probably white America couldn't talk to. But it does need more of that. You're absolutely right. We need more of people that can speak the lingo, so folks can understand this is not as hard as they make it sound.
All right. So Sean, as we come to a close, I've held you 17 minutes over. Okay. So we're getting ready to close this out, man. If you could, in the next 60 seconds, would you give us your top 5 action steps for Black Americans that they can start doing today to close this wealth gap? 5 things.
Yeah, I would say, again, we've already talked about the first one, which is make yourself more valuable. The second one I would say is start building your relationship capital. Don't work in isolation. Now, in some cases, it may require that you have to hire a coach or you have to hire somebody that's going to help you. But in a lot of cases, you just now need to get around people that you can glean from, that you can learn from, that you can understand. So if there's anything that you don't know, then your job is to get around people and know it. So you build your value, you build your relationship capital, and then you build your mental capital. I believe that this is somewhat like the second one, meaning your relationship capital, but now this is not going to anybody else. This is going to you and the source, and start understanding what you don't know. Again, there's nothing being hidden anymore. So if you want to understand how to build wealth through the stock market, is there. If you want to still understand how to build wealth through creating your own business, lowering your taxes, creating an LLC, all those things are still there. And you can learn all this stuff in YouTube, on the YouTube channel, that somebody's giving this information free. Now, I will always tell you to double check it, make sure that they know what they're talking about. But there's so much free content out there that all you need to do is have a day or two, a week, a month to really immerse yourself in all this information. And your job is to start building your mental capital. After that, you just got to take some action. You got to do it slowly, but take action, meaning that if you've always wanted to buy, invest in the stock market, take action. Open that brokerage account. Go out there and do exactly that. Pick up the phone and call that company and say, look, this is my first time. Treat me like a second grader and hold my hand and walk me through this. And that's what they're paid to do. They'll work with you. They'll certainly be as patient as they can with you. And the fifth thing is always make the adjustments. Look back at what you're doing, and failure is part of the process. But failure is not permanent if you don't allow it to be permanent. So just learn through the failing, learn through the ups and downs, learn through whatever it is that you're dealing with and going through. So I know we talked about recession. I know we talked about market crash. I know we talked about inflation. I know we talked about all those things. None of that stuff matters if you focus on what you can do. And what you can do is build your own value, get your own education, start asking the right people, and then put that action to work and then make the necessary adjustments, and you'll be fine.
What you were saying about, the fact that skin color is not the determinant here, despite systemic racism, is so true. I told a young man not long ago who is not only African American, but he's also a convicted felon.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, let me tell you something, man. If you educate yourself in the stock market, okay, it doesn't care what your color is. It doesn't care what your criminal record is. If you learn how to invest, you can yet make money despite your criminal history and despite, your skin color.
That's right.
And, the type of wealth that you're talking about creating, Sean, it's not so much dependent upon necessarily getting out here and begging somebody for a job. Of course, we need jobs,
Mm-hmm.
but we can be sort of self-sufficient if we use our head, if we educate ourselves. What you didn't tell us tonight is a story that you have told many times, and that is how, 30 years ago you were in, $200,000 worth of debt, and with the family, and how
Mm-hmm.
you had to change your mindset, and how you had to educate yourself so that you could get out of that situation. And not only did you get out that situation, you today, not to get in our business, but you're a very prosperous financial advisor. So you are the quintessential example of how we cannot allow racism to hold us back. It is the way that I raise my kids. It is the way I believe. And so that's a long way of saying, hey, thank you for being here tonight, man. It is great. I just love to hear you, articulate all of this. Somebody did ask a question. If you got another 30 seconds,
Yeah,
someone
absolutely.
someone asks, what are I bonds? I
Yeah. So,
bonds.
mhm. Yeah. I bonds right now, they're very popular because they're interest bearing bonds. I think the average I bond right now is around 9%. So a lot of people are running towards that because if you see the economy and the market going down, I bonds are a good, a good alternative. They are a treasury bond, so I would encourage you
Well,
to just go to Google.
let's back up, Sean. What is a
Mhm.
bond?
Yeah, bond is when you basically commit your money to a company or a government or a municipality and say you can hold this money for a period of time. And what they do is return interest on that bond. So if you put in $10,000 and the bond pays you 6%, they give you semi-annual interest payments. Just $600. They'll give you $300 every 6 months until that bond term is up. So maybe for 5 years. So they're going to give you the $10,000 back at the end of 5 years, but you've gotten $600 per 5 years. So you've gotten $3,000 on that $10,000 bond. So that is a bond. I bonds, as mentioned, is a different, another form of a bond. It's a government related bond. There's some stipulations to it. So I encourage you to go into Google it and say how to invest in an I bond or what is an I bond. It'll tell you everything it is, but they are right now on the forefront of a lot of people's mind because when the market was going crazy and getting 15, S&P has averaged 15% over the last 15 years. I bonds were probably about 3-4%. No one wanted those. They were not even a blip on the wall. Today, everybody's asking about an I bond because they're very attractive and people are willing to lock their money up for a couple of years to get 6, 7, 8% interest or whatever it is they're paying. So just another alternative for your money, and for some, it may be a good alternative.
See, I told y'all he's an expert. I told y'all. I told you all.
Appreciate it.
And I also got his books back on the screen. The Money Monsters, The Wealth Shift, the Consumption Trap, and the 3-2-1 Formula. All you got to do is email Sean at seanderoe@yahoo.com. Hurry up, you all. Get that. Write that email down. Hurry up, because I can't keep stalling and holding him much longer. His wife is going to come in there and get him, and we don't want that to happen. So write it down very fast. Sean Deroe, ShawnDorrough @yahoo.com, and purchase all 4 of these books. This would be a tremendous investment and could return a great deal just from this knowledge.